Hi.
Hi, Carl. How are you?
Which time zone are you in, Marc-Antoine?
Eastern. I'm in Montreal.
Oh, Montreal. Nice.
And you are in?
Seattle, Pacific.
Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
So it's early, beginning of the day.
Yeah, 8 a.m., which is good because it doesn't really interfere with work or anything.
As long as we end on the timely fashion.
That's true. Yeah, I don't think, let's see what is today, Wednesday? I usually don't have
Yes.
anything on Thursdays before 10.
Hi, Jonathan.
Huh?
No, I said hi to Jonathan, who joined us, who is joining us. I think he's still connecting.
Yeah.
Hi, Marc-Antoine. Hi, Carl.
Hey.
Bentley.
Jonathan, you're in Croatia?
Yeah.
That's cool. Is it a vacation or like exploring trip or?
Well, it's a bit of a combination. I have to leave the European Union for a few days to not overstay my visa. I'm actually married to an EU citizen, but because of the backlog that the Spanish bureaucracy has processing residency applications, I'm gonna overstay my visa before I get my residence card. So I've always wanted to visit this part of the world. I've got a cousin here, so that things kind of all came together for a trip. It's a beautiful part of the world.
Cool.
Are you in Dubrovnik itself or elsewhere in Croatia?
I'm in Dubrovnik.
Yeah, met Jack Park there ages ago.
Who's that?
Sorry, Jack Park is one of my key partners over at Topic Quests. He's the one who got me onto topic maps as a paradigm.
All right. How did you meet? At a conference, or were
Yeah,
you just wandering?
He and Dino Karabeg, who was Croatian, organized this yearly conference on knowledge federation. I met Jack Park in Ward Cunningham Zoom, or it was a Google Meet at the point, Hangouts, and he told me about it, and I said, okay, let me join you and let's talk about knowledge federation.
Oh, okay.
That was 4 years ago. The Dubrovnik is gorgeous, but there is a bit of made for tourism feel to it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Hey, Marc-Antoine, there's now 2 meetings on the calendar, and one of them says it was created by you.
Oh dear. You can delete it. I had the problem that the Zoom link didn't seem right or didn't work for me, so I tried to edit the Zoom link. I said, oh, do you want to do that? And I said yes, and it created another event instead of editing the old one.
That's annoying, yeah.
So feel free to delete. On another note, Stephen, I don't have access to the Trello, and I think I'm not the only one. So I could not read.
You do have access, but you have a different account. So now I added your new one. The other one is Mapperand. Now you create Mapperand 3, apparently. That is not your first time playing with Trello. I also added you, Jonathan.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, too many accounts, sorry. So yeah, maybe I should make sure I'm using always the same Mapperand.
But it also means you didn't do your homework.
It also means I didn't do my homework. That's absolutely correct. Well, I couldn't.
I signed off on that, Stephen, but now I just thought of a question. So we can cover that whenever you're ready, or I can ask it on the board.
It's running some unit tests in the background, which I'll have to look at later. They're failing, unfortunately. Oh, well. Yes, I will screen share the glossary if we're ready to get started. Yeah, Bentley, I think you can go ahead and just ask if no one else has anything else in the meantime.
And it may be in there and I missed it, so I apologize if I'm not being detail oriented enough. So a bear claim is just text and stuff. If someone puts in a URL, is that A, not allowed or not considered? Like, I saw someone say this here.
I think we can go into details of bear claim in a bit, but I think for those that actually haven't seen the board before, it might make sense to first check in with the rest, the order of business, which is first for everyone to, when they have time, because the process is quite a bit of text. I highly recommend you to read it because it explains why we're doing this. I proofread it again, and I think it's still the same as I wrote it up last time. So if you agree with the process, then check off your name here, and then we're certain that we aligned on what we're doing.
Appreciate you writing this up, Stephen. I think this is nice and thorough. I don't know if there's something else anyone else would think that anything else someone would think to add, but it seems like a very comprehensive and not overly verbose, even though it's long. I think it captures everything.
Yeah, and the main thing that was missing that Marc-Antoine added was the link section on cards. Which was a bottleneck because one of the rules of the process is that the person proposing the concept is the only one to allow that is allowed to edit it. So if you have competing concepts, you have competing tickets in this column. But then Marc-Antoine wanted to add links as references, and that's this section. So that's relevant to know that anyone can edit that section in the link section, or you can just comment, of course, which is almost similar, except that it might lose some history. So the links part is more of a wiki page, you could say. I don't know into how much detail I want to go in terms of the process. But yeah, the general idea is simply that we want to go from things that we have identified that we need to define, which placeholders get created in defined, then full propositions, which I fully filled out, get added to proposed definitions. And in these meetings, we decide which ones we want to align on. In the previous meeting, it became fairly obvious we're trying to align on werkclaim based on the user stories that we were looking at that time. Based on that meeting, I've written up a proposition, which we can look at this meeting to see whether or not we're aligned on what the werkclaim can be. And also to summarize, to know whether or not something you're aligned on a claim, it's really all about the examples. If like for everything in the example you agree, it is a werkclaim, the matches definition, it isn't a werkclaim when it's this, then you can be pretty certain that you agree on the definition that's written above. Or you might be what in the case of, just as Bentley introduced with the URL, we can go over that example and then add it and update it during these meetings. Lastly, if we believe we have some consensus, as we have had with declarative sentences in the past, I don't think we have had any other items on the backlog we find consensus on. That looks somewhat like this, but at any given point, even like later discussions, you discover, I actually don't think that is what it meant anymore, then you can uncheck and we can maybe reiterate on that if needed at some point. I simply added you here, Jonathan, as well as Carl, go over it when you have time. I don't think at this point, the fact that you haven't read this means that there isn't consensus. But we will see. All the old ones are still in the archived column, Mike and Juan, in case you're wondering where they went.
Saw them, yep.
If there are no further questions about process, then I think we can proceed with the question Bentley asked, which would be an example to discuss whether or not something is a werkclaim or not. So maybe you can restate it again, Bentley.
So if the declarative sentence has a URL pointing to a document where this is said, is that a werkclaim or not?
Good question.
Can you
kind
try
of gives
to
a provenance.
Can you try to write it as
Yeah,
an
so
example?
as an example is yeah, try and type it in.
I mean, one example would just be, you know, like the UN, you know, study on X claimed that pollution is bad. I mean, anything. And then in the parentheses, they might put the URL, like thinking it'll be helpful to link directly to what they're talking about. Is that the type of URL inclusion you're talking about?
Yeah, that's definitely one of them.
I think I like the study reference because, I mean, you have these DOE numbers that are supposed to be these immutable references, right, to papers. UN study, then you could do DOE. Yeah, like, it doesn't matter. You have the identification number shows that.
Can't you get a DOI for something unpublished, in which case it's still mutable?
Can you?
I'm asking, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either. Well, it's interesting because in that case it wouldn't. Okay,
and this is why Bentley's example was interesting. It's because the URL is clearly a mutable reference.
It's clearly what? Mutable or immutable?
Mutable. Yeah.
Well, the pointer is
disagree with that.
immutable,
It's
but
not-
the reference, the data in the reference is mutable.
Yeah, and that's the problem, right? So the study
Exactly.
at study.com
But I think that that's okay because
shows that the Earth is round. So is this an example of what we're looking at?
yeah.
I think it's an interesting example.
Is this a werkclaim? That's a good question.
But by the way, can I say my objection and
Oh,
why I
no.
won't check on I won't check on this one, certainly, because for me that's the definition. It's a perfectly fine definition for a standalone bare claim, and I think bare claim should be more generic and include non-standalone bare claims.
Sorry, come again?
What's the
I
difference
think-
between what's the
I think
definition
this-
then of standalone? I thought bare was the new name we were using for standalone.
Yeah, exactly. So I
this-
don't know.
and I'm disagreeing with that.
But no. We're not talking about what.
Yeah, this is what we're talking about. The question is, do I accept this as a definition for bare claim? No, that's
Well,
not how I
no.
define bare claim.
If you read the process, and that's why really I encourage you to read it properly.
Yes.
What is it? Agreeing on whether or not the word used for a definition is ideal, or on whether it is useful, definition of data modeling should be deferred as much as possible. So for the sake of the current discussion, don't care that it's called bare claim. It's a potato claim. We're not agreeing on whether or not we're calling this definition a bare claim at this point. We're agreeing on whether or not these examples match that definition, and then later we can discuss what best to name it. I named it bare claim because based on the last meeting, that was my impression of what it was, but we're not discussing of what you want to be bare claim, we're discussing this definition. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. Then the process should delay naming things.
Yes, so we're delaying that. Call it potato claim.
Okay, cool. Okay, and indeed, okay, now let's go back to the question of what do we do when the reference is implied? It's a good question. And
for me, this is not a bare claim, I think,
Okay.
because it's not a shared immutable representation. Well, the URL is
To me, it
shared.
is because
Yeah.
you're not going to change that string.
Yeah.
It's immutable.
There's other things that you can refer
It matches
to.
the definition. Yeah.
There's other things that you can refer to that can change. You can say, the president of the United States is great. The problem is the referent itself, its content changes, and there's probably gazillions of examples other than URLs of that sort of problem.
Anything that's time specific
Yep.
is going to, the way you read the sentence at any moment will change because of the time.
I think we're
Yes.
hinting at the distinction we made before with indexicality in a way. We could say that this indeed matches the definition of bare claim, because to that extent I agree, but then later we can argue that there's a need for a other bare claim that doesn't allow things like URLs in claims or indexical references. But then we can agree that this is still a bare claim.
Yeah, the example matches the definition. I would
Yes.
say that.
Yes, agreed. In that sense, it does.
So I had the first thought that came into my mind of a possible counterexample, or maybe we need to change the definition, are claims that are normative instead of descriptive. And that's a pair of terms that's often used in academic writing. Sometimes it's normative versus positive, but the distinction is between statements that take the form of the claim about the way the world is versus the way it ought to be. So the United States should avoid conflict with China. Is that a claim or not?
It matches this definition. I would call it a claim, but yes, it matches this definition.
Yeah.
It
For
can
me
be
too.
said to be true or false. It starts to stretch that a little bit, especially if the claims are express a lot of preference, like
That's what the regardless of whether it is fact or opinion part in this, it actually makes it explicit that opinion is allowed.
Yeah.
The other problem is the true or false part, which we defined once true or false, didn't we? Or I don't know if we finished that definition, but our understanding of true or false is really whether or not one agrees with it or not.
Exactly.
Well, I think maybe that should be clarified in the definition, because I do think that economists would say true or false is different from accepted or agreed with or not agreed with. The economists will say there are objective facts about the world, and these are true or false. And then statements such as we should do this or that, would not be evaluated as true or false. By that,
right.
And if you have, the possible world theory, does this fact obtain in that possible world? Whatever, people would say, no, this is not a statement that you could say is true or false by that definition.
Yeah, what you can say is this action is likely to have this beneficial impact on this measurement criterion.
Yeah, Bentley was saying the same thing in a last time a few weeks ago, right? He's saying often you can recast the claims as a statement of who will derive value from this or that, and that might still be a matter of opinion, but it's closer to a statement that can be seen as either true or false.
True or false, yeah.
But the point here is that it's never. When I wrote up the definition, it was never meant to be as an objective true or false. So true or false is.
So can we clarify that?
You need to highlight.
Can be said to be. I tried with that. The way I tried to phrase it can be said to be. I didn't say is existentially or essentially or whatever. But yeah, it might indicate that indeed we need to add this one again.
Well,
on
I don't
the
want to go
backlog.
that far. How about, maybe just a slight rephrase would make it a little.
I'm fine with rephrasing.
So consider can be agreed or disagreed with. Is that? I don't know. I'm brainstorming here.
The word acceptance and accepted and rejected is also a term I've seen a lot.
Yeah.
I see it in argumentation theory. You can accept it as true. You can accept it as desirable, as a good course of action.
I'm happy with that term.
Be it accepted or rejected as true, or is it as true as superfluous?
No, it's just accepted or rejected, and then the as you can fill in the blank with true or.
What you need is another definition for accept and reject that I guess points to the definition in economics or in academics or in argumentation theory. If there's probably an argumentation theory definition for that we would want to use.
You don't think that's close enough to?
Do we need it now?
Language.
Yeah.
Yes,
I think
according to the process in order to agree with this definition.
But if we all, we can of course add it, but is it needed now to have a common understanding of what we mean? Like, is this clearer than the true or false we had before?
Because if we're saying that's too academic, then that we need a definition, then I would rather fall back to you can agree or disagree with. And I think that we don't need to define agree and disagree.
Hey, what's an example of something that would be excluded from this definition by this inclusion of which can be accepted or rejected, quote unquote? Like what wouldn't work?
Well, that was the US should avoid conflict with China. That was a good example of it's not true or false.
I can accept or reject that.
You could include it, right?
I think it's fine.
Yeah.
What you mean?
It's not if you can accept. It's just, do we need to define accept or reject?
Are we sure everybody has the same understanding of what it means to accept or reject? That includes.
I think that's the problem, because it's like I can find a statement unacceptable even though it's true, right? I'm reading acceptance as an emotional thing of I don't want that to be true, right?
No,
so I think we do need to.
But that is essentially what, isn't that correct? You don't want it to be true. That the essence of this is really that
but
you can agree or disagree.
No, like 6 million Jews were exterminated by the Nazis.
Oh, morally,
you accept. I think you accept that as true, or do you deny that?
Well, but that's exactly the point. I mean, accept or reject, it's meaning as true. And if
Which is why we need a definition for that. That's all.
With
Yeah.
which people can choose to agree or disagree? Does
To
that
which
matter?
people can ascribe truth or falsehood.
well, but then
Well,
we're back to truth
trying
or
to be more-
falsehood.
What's
and
wrong with
leaving-
agree or
People
disagree?
people
Oh.
ascribe the truth or falsehood. It doesn't say anything about objective truth. So I also like that the people ascribing part is essential.
So I like disagree, or agree or disagree as well. I think that's actually more natural and intuitive and less academic. And maybe that's
Yeah,
There's nothing
and
wrong
less
with it for
likely for
sure.
people to get confused about. Yeah.
The choose to is probably superfluous.
then
Well,
you
but
have
are these definitions to be, used generally, or are they more for our agreement? Because I mean, I think this group kind of needs some very, at least moderately academic definitions, because we tend to kind of parse very small nuances. Whereas, if you're posting help on some website, you can just say agree or disagree. And most people, I think, are going to have a understanding of what that you mean. And for the people who really want to know, they can go into an FAQ on like, what do we mean by agree or disagree? Well, here's some discussion on that matter.
I would
right?
say wherever possible, we should use that unless we're getting more ambiguous. But I think in this case, we're getting more specific by using the more common language.
I also think I just also think that with which people can agree or disagree gets to another point about our view of the system and the truth, which is we intend it to be in the eyes of the observer as opposed to an objective statement.
That's not a discussion we need to have right now. Right now, I mean, when I wrote, it's not a discussion about whether or not this definition is useful. It's more about whether or not we have a common understanding of it. So then we can start using the definition bare claim. Is that something we want to support in the system? So this is not about saying we need to have this in our system. It's more about, are we aligned on what a bare claim means?
I think we're pretty close with this definition in any case. I also think I like this process, Stephen, because there's these examples. If there is any doubt, we can kind of appeal to the examples for some of the nuance. And so maybe we could add one or two more examples of something that you would agree or disagree with, but is not.
I'm really unclear by what is meant by, regardless of whether people may or may not truly understand each other when they state it as true or false because it's overly ambiguous. What does it mean by regardless? What about a sentence whose meaning is highly ambiguous? Then can we discuss if it's truth, if it's ambiguous? And especially, I'm interested in the case where
well, no, Michael, don't jump to what you're interested in. What is it that you don't understand about this sentence?
I'm saying, okay, if the sentence is indeed too ambiguous for me to know whether it's true or false, is that considered a potato claim?
So that's why with which people can choose to agree. So you don't have to. That's what I tried to say there.
Yeah, but I'm saying
some people might choose to agree or disagree.
Let's try to come up with an edge case that hits what you're trying to get.
Yeah, exactly.
Here, I have one. When I read the Odyssey, sorry, that's my go-to example. I read Ajax is a magnanimous hero because he killed his prisoner. Okay, so the sense of magnanimous is not the modern sense of magnanimous. The sense of magnanimous evolved in time.
Can you write the example in Hangouts?
Well, I cannot write on a screen share. So if you write.
Okay, can you dictate then?
What was the character?
Ajax is magnanimous because he killed his prisoner. I'm simplifying a bit.
Did I write it right? But does it matter? I mean, can't we just say Jack is what's the adjective? Magnanimous?
Ajax is magnanimous because it's important to match a name because
Ajax is magnanimous because
he killed his prisoner.
Okay. So what's the issue?
Yeah.
The issue is, are we speaking about the ancient sense of magnanimous or the modern sense of magnanimous, which are almost opposite? And so I don't know if that is true or false, because I don't know what sense of magnanimous you're talking about.
Yeah.
So
but
Mark
that's-
Antoine, you wouldn't, but don't you think a lot of average people
Exactly.
would have an opinion on that?
Yeah, but
Okay.
Okay.
So
Possibly.
as long as, right.
possibly, yeah, sure.
I mean, I would say most any claim anyone says is not specific enough for me to have a, so it's a spectrum.
And
and
that's
there's never a
exactly my
final,
point.
right.
That's exactly my point.
Well, there's no disagreement here. This is something we've been talking about. Everyone understands.
Yes.
Claims.
But
Yeah,
what
except
I-
that Mike Antoine is saying that this doesn't fit the definition, whereas we're all saying
No,
it
I'm
does fit
asking.
the
I'm
definition.
asking.
It
Do you
does.
think it fits the definition? I don't understand the definition because I don't know if this fits or not.
That is exactly what this last part of the definition is supposed to address.
Yeah, it's allowing for ambiguity.
Well,
Exactly.
and I'm not understanding which side it will make this fall because I can't
Both.
parse it. Both.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
It does,
I-
I guess it doesn't matter where on the spectrum it is.
Okay, so
It
we
doesn't
agree.
matter how ambiguous it is. That's the whole point. Some people will agree, others will disagree, and they
Maybe we
might be
can
talking about
rephrase
different
that.
things that's outside of, that's irrelevant to this definition.
Okay,
Yeah,
for me,
according to
regardless would
Right,
mean
but
it would fit the definition anyway. So no matter how ambiguous, it would fit the definition.
Yeah, that's the point.
But you said both, so it also does not match definition. Is that not what you
So-
meant by both?
So here's an edge case then. If what if the phrase is completely unintelligible? Which means does it match the definition based on grammar structure? Like Vlogblr is smotchblacher. Is that a claim? It sounds like, I think it is a claim because it's got the sentence structure of a claim, right?
Some
So
people
I think
might.
it matches
Yeah.
the definition.
You might put in parentheses that those words are actually just made up. And then drop it.
That's
I would
excellent.
agree that this is something that should be a bare claim, but I mean, I think we can kind of leave this as an edge case to be dealt with. Like if someone's putting in nonsensical claims, they're probably going to be spammed out. If this person persists and says, these are not nonsensical claims, administrators, Vlogblr is this and smotchblacher is that, then you realize that we were just, ignorant of the facts. I mean, yes, I would agree this is a claim. If someone continues to add this, like the system needs to recognize it and like either divert it to previous usages like that. Like you can't just, ignore it. So I would, this is.
Yeah, it's. I think it's again the difference between bad claims that we curate somehow and approve, and bad claims that we don't approve. And then where to draw that line is indeed a curation process. But for the definition purpose here, I would say it's a claim. Sorry, it's a bare claim.
Yeah, and Mark, just going back to Mark Antoine's thing, is there a way we should rephrase that last sentence in the first paragraph to be more clear?
You just want to add the parenthetical that magnanimous has a historical and a contemporary usage that oppose each other?
Oh, no, I mean the last sentence in the first paragraph of the definition.
And we also have
It
your
still
feedback,
sounded
by the way.
like Mark Antoine wasn't quite sure that expressed what we all understood. What me and
Yeah,
Steven
well,
understood. Is there a
yeah,
different?
I had trouble parsing that part.
And so can you help rephrasing it?
Yeah, let me try. Even if people may not truly understand, instead of regardless of, I would say even if people may not truly understand.
So
Is this it?
Yeah.
I have some more edge case examples I'd like to propose in here.
Is one of them indexicals?
We can do an indexical one. I was going to do first a temporal one, which would be like, it is hot right now.
That's indexical.
Temporal indexical. I don't know if that's a real thing, but Yeah,
Yep.
the type of indexical maybe. I'm not super familiar with what indexical means.
Yeah,
I'm
I don't know.
sorry.
My understanding of the word indexical, which is another definition we can work on, is that it refers to another claim. Essentially, it uses pronouns, right? And in this case, I wouldn't say it's using pronouns, even though it is technically a pronoun. We're referring to, the weather is hot right now. Okay, then it's not indexical. It's temporally indexical, which we haven't defined.
And location.
Yeah. Another one is
Wait.
things that are obviously false, like 1 + 1 = 5.
But what's right? These
In
fit the
what base?
definition, right? That's why I wrote you
I
as
think
flat
it
as an
fits the
example.
definition. I think it does fit the definition. I just want to raise those
Yeah.
examples.
So
of
here this
questions
flat is
because-
already there, but let me add things which are obviously false.
I wouldn't say this flat is obviously false. You have to
Not to
know
everyone.
about science. I would say it's obviously flat until you study the science, right? Until somebody tells you.
Okay, I'll just add the other one.
Yeah, just do 1 + 1 = 5. Yeah.
I'm sure there's a way that in some
Oh, yes.
context is true, but we can go for it.
Carl, you have your hand raised as well, by the way.
Oh, sorry, that was for the indexical.
Okay, yeah, we have indexical examples, but yeah, that's one. I think we're aligned on that. There's another thing on the backlog we have to address. You commented on this, Carl. I don't know. We should probably look at that as well after.
Yeah, I thought maybe we would defer this until we were good with examples. Do
Okay.
we need something like this pie is great? Did we get something like that? I mean,
No, I don't think so. The herbs flat.
No,
No.
let's add it. So the spy is great is a good example of does not match.
That's not. No. The definition says nothing about not allowing indexicals.
Okay.
Right.
Well, it's okay. Good.
It's abhorrent, but it fits the definition.
I would say okay. Let's not
But-
add it there then.
but it
Despise
refers-
What about the
delicious.
temporal example I put in? Go ahead.
Paragraph. The only thing which can be assumed as shared context is a shared immutable representation. When you say this spy is great, you're referring to something outside the shared immutable representation.
Yeah,
Same
meaning-
with it's hot
meaning that-
now.
Meaning
so
that
on.
you cannot assume that this is shared. That's all it means, but it's still a bare
Oh.
claim.
How is this different from a declarative sentence then?
The declarative sentence is if the only thing that's stored in the bare claim is a declarative sentence, it's one and the same. But the difference here is that we're planning to add formalisms on top of that, where you might have a declarative sentence with an attached definition.
what I would add out, oh, sorry.
Or you might have an image. Sorry?
I'd say what I would add about this example is that, I think this pie is delicious is fine for me for a potato claim. And to me, it just, begs a little bit of the question of we might have to add further refinements, like valid potato claim,
Yes.
or, passes these checks potato claim, and we can
Yes.
add those later.
I'm gonna add it on the backlog, but we don't have to do that now.
So
I'm
Stephen, were
really-
you saying that a photo could be a
Yeah,
claim?
that's what we discussed a couple of meetings ago.
So do we have an example of that? And is it in the definition, I guess?
Yes, here I have an image which contains a caption, the earth is flat, or a mathematical proposition.
I'm sorry, I did read that, I'd forgotten.
Yeah.
Can you
And
put
I don't-
an actual photo in the Trello board? I'll look
Yeah, I
into it.
think you
No
can.
problem.
you
I
probably
might put one in there.
feel
but
free
go
to
ahead.
add it. You have my permission.
And I don't want to derail the conversation. I probably shouldn't say anything if I have to preface it with that. But I mean, I don't think images need to have explicit text in them to be bare claims. I mean, I think a human looking at maybe a meme, they kind of think they know what that meme means. And I think what's interesting about memes is that different people may interpret it differently, but one person looking at it may think it means this clearly. Another person looking at it may think it means something else clearly to them. But I think both, in any instance, it's a claim, but humans may differ on what it means to them.
Yeah, I disagree with that. I'd have to see a picture that is very clearly a claim. Because,
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, a picture of words I could maybe accept as
No,
as
well,
a claim, but I don't think that a photo
I think
qualifies as a claim.
Well, the definition
photo-
says that they can agree or disagree, and if you can agree with a meme, it fits the definition. So it would be nice to get an example of that.
a photo.
Like, is a joke okay? Is a joke a claim, a bare claim? I don't think so.
No, because you can't agree with a joke.
In the case of
So
a
can you
photo,
agree with a photo?
That depends on what the photo shows.
yes, can I? The photo, you can agree or disagree that it's actual undoctored representation of reality. So that way, the photo has a self-contained claim that, you know, it represents something that happened.
That's indexical. That's this photo is authentic and unaltered.
Indexical is allowed.
Indexical.
I think we're really treading on what is a valid bare claim, what are claims that we want to allow, non-indexical bare claims. But within this definition, indexicality is allowed.
I'm more and more.
But no, but my point is that the statement that you make about the picture is the claim. It's not the picture itself that's the claim.
No, I agree up to a point. I did say the photo carries a claim of accuracy, and it is not identical to the claim of its own accuracy, but it carries it. But when you, if I present a photo as evidence, first I'm making a claim. This photo is evidence that some other claim, and second, there's an implicit claim that this photo has been undoctored, right? Now,
I mean, it could be that the photo was doctored and that was your claim.
But what is on the discussion here, Mike Antoine? What is, in this context, what is an example of the bare claim that we're discussing? Because you said a lot.
What I'm saying is, I can present a photo and make a claim by just presenting a photo.
I mean, I could present a pie and make a claim just by presenting the pie. I don't see the difference here. You're not actually saying anything about either. You're intuiting there's some claim being made about it, but you're not expressing it, and so I don't consider that to be a claim.
You don't think if you had a photo of a flat Earth, a 3D image of flat Earth, that's not making a claim that the Earth is flat?
Because you could be presenting it to say that isn't this a nice painting? Or isn't this a funny irony?
Right,
which is also true.
But that's all accuracy of understanding.
There's many.
As long as one person can interpret it as a claim, then it fits the definition.
Maybe we should broaden a bit and say with which people generally can agree or disagree, like just to give some leeway that we do expect.
I agree, Tim, that when I'm presenting a photo, I could be making many claims, and it's context that tells me which claim I'm making with the photo, except the fact that this photo was taken, and which I say is always there. But I will say something else. I think it's partly true of any sentence. I can be quoting a sentence. Am I making the claim of the sentence? I'm saying so-and-so said blah, so that's a claim. Or I could just quote.
That is a claim.
Yeah, that is a claim.
The claim is that they said that thing, not the thing that was said.
That's correct. That's correct. That's correct. But now suppose I just quote a proverb. There are many interpretations of that proverb. And again, the proverb may be true or false, but I can.
We're not talking about
interpretation.
Exactly.
The problem is, we're not talking about interpretation. We're talking about is this something that could be understood as something you agree with or not, right?
Yeah, true enough. Okay, fair. I'm withdrawing that one. I see that the meme was also withdrawn, so let's forget photos for now.
I mean, they're valid theoretical cases, but for practical discussion, I think we can avoid those as well. We need to draw a line somewhere, right?
But by the way,
I just wonder if we should remove the image containing the caption "The Earth is flat," because is there any reason for the system to support images if the only acceptable images are ones that are super clear about what they represent, like textually, like basically they're just an image of text?
The main reason is that bare claim is an abstraction for anything, any medium that makes a claim, and we don't want to lock us into only textual bear claims right now. It allows us to have discussions like textual bear claims or love bear claims or etc. And that's primarily because Mercant 1 asked for it. That's why I broadened the definition.
Yeah. By the way, I'm finding the definition clearer and clearer. I have less and less contestation with it. I'm not sure it will correspond to anything in the system. But that's another story, isn't it?
Yeah, we don't need to discuss it now.
Okay.
That's okay.
Then
yes.
Once we agree on this definition, we can go back to the user stories where they actually were introduced, because we didn't start discussing this for no reason. We started discussing this because we believe those user stories actually used bear claims. Then we can revisit that to see whether that's still the case.
Right.
We have almost no not matching definition examples, which is a bit weird. But maybe first I want to address Carl's comment, because he's actually the only one that did his homework. And I want to see whether or not we should incorporate this. So Carl suggested I would not include in practice whether supporting and opposing argument should be judged as a non sequitur, should solely be based on the shared immutable representation. That is here. Can you argue a bit more about it, Carl?
Yeah, I mean, I went back and forth on whether this is, like a nitpicky thing or, fundamental, but I think I just was resistant to including anything in this definition that, was sort of intended to control or, be normative around how users should interact with this, potato claim or bear claim, because I think humans are coming to some sign, so to speak, or some symbol, like they're going to do what they're going to do, and I'm hesitant to set off the definition in a way that we have to sort of tell people like, oh, you didn't think the right way when you looked at this. Like I would like people to be able to look at text and think what they think, and if the system then offers something else to like suggest, well, but maybe you want to look at other text that's more specific or something else, fine, but I don't know. I think people are going to come with their own biases, their own, presumptions about shared context. Is this a context in a closed community in which a lot of assumptions are made? Is this a context in an open community in which, few assumptions may be made?
Yeah, well, I added it because it is part of definition. I mean, how can I explain this?
I mean, I guess if that part of the quote unquote definition were itself, non-normative, non-controlling, and it's more just offered as explanatory, like, we expect people,
exactly,
our intention is for people to behave this way, but we recognize we can't control how people will.
Exactly.
behave.
You cannot control whether or not people find something a non sequitur. It will greatly depend on how well they understand the claims they're judging to be non sequiturs. But as a bear claim, the whole point is when that person is making the judgments, they're only allowed to look at the shared immutable representation. What their verdict is of whether or not it's a non sequitur is irrelevant. It's more like that's the purpose, that they're not going to start looking at mutable stuff that is not part of the shared immutable representation. That's why I added it.
When you say not allowed to, I mean, that makes me think that somehow any implementation of this would have to say, by the way, don't Google this, you need to just look at this text, like don't start giving yourself external ideas, which we can't do, and no one's going to follow that. Like people are going to research things when they see them.
It means that in all the examples where things are like, for example, indexical, when somebody says, where is the example? Where did the pie go?
This at the end, this
pie is delicious. Then someone can say, no, my pie wasn't delicious, and that's relevant. That's not a non sequitur because their pie might not have been delicious. You cannot say, well, that's not irrelevant. That's a non sequitur because that's not the pie we're talking about. But that's, of course, a reason why we want to draw a distinction between valid bear claims that are overly indexical and useful bear claims that are approved on a platform. But that's another discussion that we backlogged here as valid bear claim.
Well, but if we defer treating indexical things like this pie is delicious to some later definition or whatever about, say valid bear claims, why do we need to add this part on, this part about people need to only consider the argument itself? This to me seems more appropriate for a later definition, like on, okay, what constitutes a valid bear claim? Because now if we're actually making a judgment about, okay, does this claim make sense for the system or not? I think that piece of text would make sense because, yeah, we give people some guidelines of how the criteria for judging these valid bare claims.
Yeah, I think I can agree on that. I cut it out already. Yes, I agree. And it simplifies this one. Jesus, what's happening here?
Sorry.
But does this match a definition? If you can see the moon from here, then you can also see the sun from here. Has anyone ever seen?
I'm really
No,
kind of experimenting. I can't see anyone that says the Earth is flat and it has a picture of a flat Earth.
But this image does not match my definition. This doesn't match a definition, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I'm still experimenting. But just because it's a question, I mean, they're phrasing it in a question, but it's making a claim. Flat Earth debunked.
Yeah, true. If you consider the last one.
I mean, it's making an argument that it's debunked because nobody has ever seen. Like, has anyone ever seen is actually a rhetorical device to say nobody has ever seen, and there's a claim there.
Okay, Bentley, I can approve it if you say flat Earth debunked in this image. Do you see? But it's quite essential that you point to what the claim is.
Oh, well, no, right. You mean that the fact that this claim doesn't match the bullet point with the text?
If you only look at the image and that's all you have, like, what is a claim? The entire image?
So is the rule that you have to have some text?
In practice, I think that's almost what it comes down to, where it should be obvious what the text is.
I mean, for one thing, this is a definition of something called a bare claim, which is part of the definition is declarative sentence. And the question is, do we understand?
No, that's an example.
I would want to just take images out of it as an option for now and add them back in later, because
it complicates things.
Yeah.
That's also what I suggested originally, but one wanted them and more for.
So what do you think?
I did say we can leave them for later. I'm not going to. I say images exist as a case of symbols. They represent something. But by the way, I never said let's use images as in claims. I said let's use images as symbols for concepts. And I'm thinking more of images as symbols of entities rather than symbols of claims.
Okay, so for claims, we can remove them?
Yep, I'm fine.
We'll just remove that.
Or we move it to the
this
bare concept.
No, it does not match the definition. There we go.
Oh, you know what? I took out the image, so that link may not work anymore.
No.
I'll fix it. Go ahead. It may work for a few minutes, but I don't know if it's going to drop out.
I'm going to write an image for which it is not immediately clear what the claim is.
Now that kind of implies that some images are allowed. Are we allowed images at all or not?
Okay, no, we don't. So an image that contains a claim.
I mean, or even in the definition, we should say it's just text.
Well, you know.
So
no, because we wanted math as well, right?
I'm sorry, you're right.
If declarative sentence is an example, as opposed to a requirement of this definition, we need to find an example that matches the definition that is not a declarative sentence.
That's this.
Is
a mathematical proposition.
So what format do you foresee that mathematical proposition be in if it's not text?
And that's a very good question. And that we talked a bit about that like a couple of meetings ago.
I gave category diagrams as an example.
But even a more, in my opinion, practical example is exactly a declarative sentence with an associated definition. It's not only the declarative sentence. At this point, you have a declarative sentence with some additional formalized data attached to it, or reified data attached to it. And it's the combination of the two that makes a bare claim.
That makes it a non-bare claim, you mean?
No, a bare claim. Okay, let's add it as an example. Racism is bad with an attached definition of racism.
Well, I think you're shooting for something
Then it's not.
that
If
you like. I think you're shooting for something that's more complex, and I feel like we should be taking smaller steps. Which means, like, I know your definition you're proposing in opposition to Marc-Antoine's contextual claim or whatever we name that. I understand that's the purpose of this definition. But
We already
and
have a
that's-
definition
and
for
that's why-
declarative sentence, right? Don't forget.
Right.
If you only do text, we already have it. That's this.
But I mean, maybe this is just then the definition is it's a declarative sentence plus something else.
Okay,
It's the shared immutable representation that really matters.
I'm totally confused at this point.
By the last edition of that I added?
Oh yeah, very much, very
why?
much.
Can you explain why it doesn't fit the definition?
Okay, when you say attached, the question is, okay, the only thing which can be assumed as shared content is the shared immutable representation. Now, is the attached definition part of the shared immutable representation? I thought the shared, okay, so I thought the shared immutable representation was only racism is bad.
No.
Okay, so it's not just a string of text. Bare claim is not just a string of text, which I thought it was.
Nowhere writes it here.
But you said it a few times, so I got confused. It's okay. Now you're including compounds, which is fine. But that's why I was confused. But okay, how is this different from declarative sentence then? Are declarative sentence just a piece of text?
Yes.
Okay.
Is declarative sentence a minimum component of what you're calling bare claim? Is it?
I want to argue yes, but for
but
disagreement reasons, I would
definition.
argue any bare claim has a declarative sentence. Yes, I would argue so, but I don't. We had disagreement there with Marc-Antoine, and I don't think it's necessary for the definition to be useful, because the only real thing I care about is the fact that it's a shared immutable representation that people can express agreement or disagreement with. That's the key part. Whether or not it's text actually does not really matter that much to me.
So it can have multiple parts.
I would say, since we're a little confused on this right now, again, let's not bite off more than we can chew, which is define something that is a declarative sentence plus whatever you want to include in this, whether it's shared immutable representation of a declarative sentence or whatever. And then if somebody comes up with a different thing they consider to be a claim that doesn't fit into their claim, we can discuss a new name for that thing or whatever. But like, I think if you're trying to head off or include something that we can't even define at this point, then maybe we're biting off more than we can chew.
I don't know. I mean, as I said, my understanding of that potato claim was totally wrong, and now I stand corrected. I'm still trying to see what Stephen's trying to do. I'm still
trying to include the shared immutable, everything we talked about before, where you want to start attaching definitions, where you want to start adding compounds and all that stuff will require additional formalisms.
Fair. And you want them in one container. You want a container for this. Fair enough. Okay.
Shared immutable representation of that thing.
Of all those.
And the bare claim at that. Yes, and the bare claim is all those bits in an immutable representation.
Yeah, I think bare is less and less and less and less appropriate for this. Every time you call it bare claim, I jump. Let's call it potato claim for now, please.
Well, I call it standalone because you should be able to use it by itself standalone. That's where my original name came from, but I know that you disagree because for you standalone is, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But regardless of what to name it, is this example clear?
Bear is worse, let's put it that way.
Is this example clear? The declarative sentence racism is bad, but it's not only the declarative sentence, it's also definition, which is this text, for example. It might be a knowledge graph, an immutable reference to a knowledge graph item.
To an immutable knowledge graph item, yes, makes sense.
Can we add to the definition? Sorry, I'm probably
Yes.
interrupting. Something that states it can have multiple
Components.
components.
Yeah, that might help.
Because that's the main difference between it and a declarative sentence is, well, I mean, except for the fact that the components can be more than a declarative sentence. But
Is that why we're here about adding things to the text? Is it because we're trying to distinguish this from declarative sentence? Sorry.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
And I feel like my one concern for the process is just that, again, like we're trying to bite off more than we can chew. I feel like what we should be doing is making lots of definitions and seeing which ones fit into what we want to try to do. For example, if we wanted.
So this definition comes from something we want to do before you go too deep into that. This definition comes from 1 and 3. After having that discussion in understanding what 1 and 3 is, this definition arose because it supports these two use cases. If we're going to narrow the definition, we're also going to narrow these two use cases. I would be fine with that because, again,
no, but that's what I'm saying is I don't think you should stress so much about that. Like, I think you should unlink them and say, let's define something that we all understand.
Definitions and user stories.
That you can't unlink them. The whole point of trying to define these user stories is that we have a shared agreement with what they are.
No. You can build up to the thing that you're trying to say in the user case by getting smaller definitions.
No,
right?
That's not what the process is.
A standalone claim. A standalone claim is a declarative sentence with no surrounding context or link to context, right? We may have to define context here, but you could define that, and maybe that's not exactly what you meant for that user story. But now we've got a word standalone claim that we can actually use all the time and say we mean something that doesn't have any context, right? And then you can define your claim as, oh, it's a standalone claim and a bare claim and a declarative sentence that is immutable. And we've got words that we understand and can build together rather than trying to build them all at once into one definition.
Isn't that what we're doing?
As a web
author, I want to link to a claim in a claim repository so that my readers can support and oppose a claim, which is also visible to any web content linking to the same claim. So yeah, I say I want, when I read claim here and I added this user story, I'm referring to a bad claim. And I'm fine with reducing the definition of bad claim to only always having a declarative sentence. I'm fine with that. The problem was that Marc-Antoine wasn't fine with that. So to him, that user story, the way he understands it, does not align with the definition that I originally introduced. That's why we're having this discussion. So either we decide these are two separate user stories, which is also an option.
What I'm saying is you could define it the way you want, and Marc-Antoine can come up with a definition for what he thinks should be included in that user case. And then we can talk about each definition, which is what the purpose of definitions is, to abbreviate concepts. And then we can decide if that fits the use case or not, right?
Tim, I will side for a change with Stephen here, saying that is what he's trying to do exactly. And so we're starting with his definition. It took me time to understand what he's trying to say, but now I think I do. And next time I can say, okay, this is how I would define, this is what I think are the relevant entities for my constructions. And actually, now that I understand better what he's saying, yes, I think that is a relevant entity, by the way.
Which is a big win.
Which is a big win, because I didn't think it was a relevant entity because I misunderstood his definition. So that was a useful process as far as I'm concerned. And then we can, but I have other relevant entities and I'll try to introduce them, and then we'll see which ones fit the use case or use cases, because yes, maybe splitting the, forking the use case is a useful thing to do. I suspect it may happen.
Definitely. So we're trying to find agreement or disagreement, so we can then see whether or not we're talking about the same
No,
user
I
stories or can
understand.
create multiple.
I understand, and I agree it's a useful process. My only point is it's not taking small steps and building up, which means it's taking, I think, a lot longer to get to where you want to go. If you had said a shared immutable representation of a declarative sentence instead of example, right?
That's what I started with. If you remember.
Okay, but you
do you remember like the
example.
discussions
Okay.
years ago? What is it?
Okay, all right, but
we've done that. This is an evolution of having learned, having gone through the process where we know that we're interested in more than only declarative sentences already. It's a recurring topic.
I guess what's missing is just examples to the contrary of declarative sentence. Okay, you have a formula, maybe.
So that's why I added this one. Can we focus on that one? That's maybe the last topic for today. Like, is it clear that this is more than just a declarative sentence?
Without the racism example, it's not clear to me that it's more than a declarative sentence, but I don't see a huge problem with that right now because they're kind of in two different contexts. Like one was more linguistic, one is more, I guess more geared towards our system. And I don't know if it simmers for a while and we decide these really are the same thing, then we just collapse the definitions. I'm not concerned if they are, but without the racism is bad, or I guess the image one, those two examples. Yeah, I don't see how it differs from a declarative sentence in terms of like what things in the world would be identified by these two definitions. But I can see there's a difference in intent.
I have a question actually. Okay, go ahead.
I guess what's missing then is what are the other things? There's no definition or boundary on what are the other things that can accompany a so-called bare claim.
I have a question. For example, I raised the example of multilingual.
It's in the list already. Check the examples. Oh.
No, my question is, distinct bare claims. I'm asking why are they distinct? If I made a bare claim out of three together, because we agree we have compounds, why is that not a bare claim?
It depends on the intent. If your intent is showing a different language to each individual different user, then you don't have a shared immutable representation.
No, I have an immutable representation, which is built out of three components.
You have immutable storage, but I'm asking because what is your reason for doing that?
No, but that's exactly. I'm trying to see the limits of the definition and what it means. If I have, forget multilingual, if I have two different rephrasings of the same claim, that's a compound made of multiple immutable representation. Is it part of the definition that there's a single declarative sentence, no more than one declarative sentence? I'm asking you that.
I think it would be useful to do so, to be honest. It might make this whole thing more understandable and there might be less ambiguity on that concept.
But I think we're dealing with two different concepts. One where it's allowed, one where it's not allowed. I'm not yet sure which one is relevant, but the way you allow compounds, for me, paraphrases would be part of what I'm looking at if I'm thinking of this concept. I don't see why definitions are allowed, but paraphrases aren't.
Sorry.
I don't see why definitions are allowed, but paraphrases aren't. Rephrasings.
But rephrasings are allowed if it's only the rephrasing. Which thing is the shared immutable representation right now you want to discuss?
No, I'm trying to see, is your potato claim, does it allow multiple phrasings of a claim?
I would say no. I would say these are probably multiple bad claims.
Okay.
Because what is the shared? What is the reason for having multiple phrasings? Probably it means you're only going to show one.
Oh,
Do you agree or disagree with the multiple phrasings as a whole, or do you agree or disagree with one of the phrasings?
right.
And that's the intent here. It's really that by the shared immutable representation, it's really the thing that you agree or disagree on is clear that it's that thing. That's also why this image, by the way, I said was problematic, because there's a lot more on here than. So I would say it's a good property for any bare claim that it can be represented as an authoritative declarative sentence.
Now, somebody in conversation might say something like, the earth is flat, or as they say in French, La Terre est plate, and string that all together as a single declarative sentence, although a complex one. That would be confusing, obviously.
Yes. So I guess the question
Maybe we should
is,
add that, literally what I said there as a,
yes.
yeah.
So let's just say Trump is bad. Obama is great. Is this?
Oh Lord, no, that should
Well,
match.
my example is slightly different from that, although.
No, I think it's similar, right? You have two claims here.
It is
Like,
similar.
It's not really clear that it's ends.
But it's a compound.
No,
It's a
it's not
compound.
clear. It doesn't say ends. Who knows? Maybe it's
Yep.
more. It's
But that's
just
the
two
assumption.
sentences.
Like me as a human, I can agree or disagree with this.
Yeah,
That's why
true.
I think,
For
Yeah,
me,
true.
it matches.
yeah, it matches.
Okay.
I would say it matches as well. It's not ideal, the way of organizing knowledge necessarily, but
Yes.
Yeah.
I would add this other example, the earth is flat, or as they say in French.
And for me, that's also a match. I can agree or disagree with that.
Yeah, I agree.
Why would that not be a match?
That's clearly a match.
Yeah, I think it is a match as well.
Yeah, it's a match. It really boils down to, can I agree with something or not? Or can I agree or disagree with something or not? Yeah. And this way, I think also pictures are included, but the one listed there is not something I can agree with because it's, I don't know. Is it an explanation? No, it's
Making a claim. You can make a claim in plain English, or you can make a, that sounds like a circular definition, but.
The problem with the image is, if I agree with the image, it's not clear which part of the image I'm agreeing with.
Yeah.
For example, am I
Yeah, but it's
agreeing...
the same with the compound. That's why I added that one.
No, there's a difference.
It's also the same with
I wasn't
ambiguous,
done. I wasn't done talking
True.
as usual, Stephen. I'm saying, am I agreeing with the final conclusion or with the reasoning, with the argument? These are two distinct claims, and if I agree with the image, it's not clear. If in the case of the two claims, Trump is bad, Obama is great, it's implicitly a conjunction. If I'm agreeing with the conjunction.
To you, a lot of people might say the same here. It's implicitly flat earth debunked, and
Listen,
like Bentley said, it's the same with ambiguous.
Okay.
Implicitly, it might be one or the other.
I'll raise another point here. We said even if it's not the claim is too ambiguous to agree or disagree with it, I would say even if the claim is too ambiguous to even agree on what the claim is.
But that's
because
the same.
No, it's not.
Oh, you mean, okay, yeah. Oh, maybe that's it. Maybe the claim is the whole of the shared immutable representation. Maybe that's the missing part in this definition. That you cannot say, well, the claim is not only flat earth debunked, it's actually everything on this image.
That would make sense.
Right. So are you saying, Stephen, that maybe that image is a claim?
If we broaden it to that, yes. I would still have later discussion whether or not it's a valid bad claim, but if we broaden it to that definition, yes, because I think...
That's what, yeah.
Yeah, I would go for that too.
Agreed.
And that means that we can
should make it very clear that the claim is not just the text in that image, in that example.
Yes.
It's the whole image, the whole
A shared immutable
representation.
representation with which people can agree or disagree as a whole.
Yeah.
Can we make that more?
Yeah,
We know what we mean, but how can we make this clear?
Fair enough.
Considering the whole. When considering
I think as a whole phrase it
the
quite well, I thought.
whole of the
I
representation.
think that adds words without necessarily adding clarity over as a whole.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
It's kind of colloquial, but I'm having trouble thinking of any way better than that.
Well, the examples can point it out, right? So the image is back in. But then we just need to find
that contains a set of claims, a set of related claims.
And why don't, maybe the example should be a set of an image that contains text that could also be interpreted as well, anything.
And as a counter example, I'm sorry, Marc-Antoine.
Go ahead. No, it's just I wanted to say the image. No,
counter example to the definition would also be like two immutable representations, right? Not just because the definition is about one as a whole.
Yeah, but if you combine them, you have one.
Yeah, but like two uncombined immutable representations, which happens.
Yeah, and that's a counterexample. You haven't combined them.
Yeah, but it's hard to write up as an example other than saying they're not combined.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, we're finding stuff that does not fit the definition, right? So
yeah.
Two separate, unlinked, immutable representations, basically, right?
Yeah, two with a W.
Oh. Let's go over the other ones. I was still happy with this.
The mathematician in me wants to say two or more.
I like this as a whole edition. I think that's a nice concluding thing where we were struggling.
And wasn't there another comment from Carl at the bottom, a suggestion, or did we already incorporate it?
We did. So I was cutting out.
Okay.
It's next useful discussion probably. Well, we'll see where the user stories take us next week. I think for the sake of this meeting, we came a long way. Maybe to conclude, we could give it a better name. For me, this is still what I understood as your bad claim, Marc-Antoine. But I mean, I'm really fine naming it anything.
Maybe a raw claim.
Okay, let me think. How would I name that? No, yeah, maybe you're right. Actually, let me think.
I've been paying attention when you were talking.
Yeah. You're right. I was disagreeing before. I was misunderstanding, but now that I understand what you're saying, maybe this is a bear claim. Okay.
Excellent. Take your time, go through the examples, find some more, and then we can take this offline. I hope next week to continue back to the user stories to see what the next, maybe we have a new term we can start using in them.
Yeah, you know what? I realized that for me, bear conveys uncompound. I used to call them decontextualized, right? Or context-independent claim, maybe would be a good adjective.
Yeah, I don't dislike context independence because that's makes very clear how it should be interpreted.
Though we haven't rejected indexical claims, right?
True.
So it's not context independent in that sense.
Oh,
Yes. So maybe the valid bad claim.
It's context unaware claim. Or I really like decontextualized.
self-contained is also a word.
But it's not necessarily self-contained because it may be indexical.
Yeah, but okay. Well, yeah, I see what you're saying.
Let's go with bear, and then we can still later refine what I know what you mean, because I also want those, which I call an atomic bear claim or something, like it can't, or a non-compound bear claim or whatever. We can name something later, but let's, as a working title, name it what you've been naming.
That's a good working title.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I can live with it as a working title. Okay, good. Excellent, folks.
Perfect.
Did you guys agree on a process after meetings? Like, how do we summarize or anything?
Well, this is a summary. That's a great thing about having a process.
Okay.
Could people vote though if they do agree with the outcome? That would just be nice to capture that.
Yeah, at this point, I should sign in.
And so this process here is specifically about definitions. But I wonder if
it's definitions to support user stories, so we can start. It's actually the main reason for this process is I want to pinpoint which user stories we share and which we don't share, to start teasing apart what is a common system we're trying to build, what are the user stories that it shares. But we can only have that discussion if we share the same language.
Do you think that we should still have a separate document to just write up at the end of meetings, a summary of what we come to an agreement on, even if it's also represented here? For example, that we've come to agreement on that process.
We could also write that in the YouTube description.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to cut and paste the majority of that. You can't do everything in the YouTube description. That would be a fair. So I can do that, or Felix, if you have internet connection now.
It's still bad, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if we need it in a third document, Jonathan, but
I guess if it's already, which document is it in now? Was it in a meeting notes document?
well, it's just in Trello.
Oh, okay.
So I'll cut and paste it out of Trello. That way we have a snapshot of what it was at Trello at the time we had the meeting.
You mean the
That'll be in
definition?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's not necessarily what I was thinking of, like putting the definition in a document, but just summarizing, hey, in this meeting, we agreed on this process for coming up with definitions.
Oh, the process itself.
Well, the fact that we agreed,
so that
bullet points on things that
right.
decisions that were made during the meeting.
So yeah, if you'd like to have that, feel free to write it up.
Well, I was just asking if anyone else thinks that would be useful.
Yeah.
I think it would be useful to external people, which is the purpose of the YouTube thing, but only transitionally. Like if they're, maybe we should have a separate discussion since we're running out of the meeting on. I don't think it'd be useful to me, although if I wasn't in the meeting, it'd be nice. I don't have to watch you guys at 2x. Although I like you better at 2x. So. Let's talk about that some more, Jonathan. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, we're probably out of time.
Thanks for a good meeting, everybody.
Thank you for today. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Goodbye.